Hello, and welcome back to Guided Souls. I'm your host, Katie, and I'm so excited to be back here for another week with you guys. If you prefer to watch instead of listen, you can head on over to my YouTube channel at Guided Soul Katie, and I will also link that below in the show notes. I'm super excited for today's topic. We are going to talk all about soul missions. And first, I just want to say thank you to everyone who reached out about last week's episode talking about intuition. And I got a lot of positive feedback on that. And it really just made me think like, okay, what other concepts are out there that used to like drive me insane and keep me up at night? And I was always trying to like Google them and figure them out that now I just sort of take for granted and don't really think about. And can I go back and try and break those down to be a tool that I would have found very helpful a year ago, and hopefully that people who are listening to this podcast will find helpful. So that is what led me to talk about soul missions today. And really, what we're going to discuss is what is a soul mission and what are some of the different techniques that you can use to discover yours and hone in on yours. So, I know it's a super broad topic and it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So, this is just how I interpret it, how it's really helped me evolve over the past year, and hopefully it can help you as well. So, first and foremost, I just want to talk about what is a soul mission. If you are familiar with the term Dharma, it's similar to that, and that is kind of like your purpose, your reason for being here. I'm not going to use the word Dharma just because I'm always super careful about using terms from a religion that I'm not really well versed on. Like, I don't necessarily feel like I have the knowledge behind the word Dharma to use that term. However, if you resonate with that term, just know that that's along the same lines as what I'm talking about. But for me, a soul mission is like the imprint that you're meant to leave on the earth while you're here this time around. And it's the impact that you have on the people in your family, on your friends, with your career, kind of like your legacy. And it does not just focus on your career, it really encompasses who you are as a person, which is part of why it's so hard to figure out what it is. And to a certain extent, I don't really think that you figure it out. But there are certain, I think, clues and pieces of the puzzle that we get over time, both as growing up and in our adult lives, that kind of help us shape the general direction that we're going in. And maybe more importantly, it can give us direction and guidance on like the directions that maybe aren't so aligned with us. You'll hear people talk about living in alignment and being in alignment with your higher self. And to me, being in alignment really just means walking the path of your soul mission and doing the best you can to try to align your actions, your beliefs, the work that you're doing with that soul mission and soul path. So I came up with a series of questions that I do think will be helpful in terms of trying to narrow the scope of what your soul mission is. And I want to point out that I did not come up with these out of thin air. I think the first time I saw the basis for this was in Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk, which I know there's like some controversy out there surrounding him now. So I'm not trying to make a statement on that, but originally this is where I saw these types of questions, and in his book, it's in relation to the term Dharma. And I know that there's other individuals out there who have similar frameworks. So this is just my own spin on it, but by no means did I come up with this basic framework and concept on my own. And so the first question is, what am I good at? But for me, I like to tweak it even a little bit more and say, what am I oddly good at? Because there are things that maybe I'm good at, but like a lot of other people are good at them. And so what are those things that you wouldn't necessarily go into an interview and say like, this is my strength, but you have just noticed either from people's reactions over the years or, the impact that you've made doing certain things that you're like, I'm like oddly good at that in a way that maybe not everybody else is. And I think kind of having that distinction can help in terms of giving us a little bit more guidance. And so I'm going to answer these questions for myself while I'm on here, which feels a little bit awkward because, part of it is like just telling you guys what I'm good at. But my hope is that it can normalize this process and make it feel like, oh, it's okay to, be your own hype person and be like, yeah, I am good at that, and just own that and own this process. And it can actually be really fun if you do it that way. And if you're really stumped in coming up with something, you can either ask a friend, ask a family member, ask your partner, or you can just like write down what they would say you're oddly good at. So for me, something that I noticed pretty early on that I'm oddly good at, that makes a lot of sense with me sitting here now talking to you, is I've always noticed that my words carry a lot of weight, and I have a way of articulating something that other people are thinking or feeling, but they can't necessarily put it into the words to really represent what it is that they're thinking or feeling. And I noticed this both in school and in the workplace. Anytime I would have to give a presentation or something, if it was a group project, I would always be the one to present because it was just kind of like, that's your thing, And I was, complimented by a lot of teachers on my, public speaking abilities. And then when I moved into the corporate world, I would notice that like I was never the person to dominate the conversation in a meeting. I was never the person to say the most, but I would say things that people would just be like, yeah, yeah, I like the way you put that. Definitely. Let's run with that. To the point where, I'd be in a similar meeting a year later and someone would bring up something that I said a year ago. And I would be like, wow, that's like kind of strange that I just had this one thought that I said that ended up being, something that stuck with that person for a year. So I think I've always had this understanding that the way that I say things, the manner in which I say them, and the delivery that I have for some reason tends to stay with people and tends to like um, hit a nerve in them, or just resonate with them more than maybe the average person would. I also think that I'm a really good teacher and coach, from tutoring when I was younger to teaching dance for many years. It's always been kind of a passion and skill of mine to be able to take these difficult concepts and break them down, but also have a lot of patience and encouragement and kind of just be like a safe space for a person who is learning something for the first time. And I also had that kind of in the corporate world as well, both as a manager and someone who would train new individuals. Like I feel like I had this way of both breaking things down, but at the same time having a lot of patience, encouraging the person, and just making them feel like it was safe and acceptable to make mistakes because they are learning and they are human. And at the end of the day, they're doing a great job. Kind of in line with those two things, I've always really noticed that I have a lot of leadership skills within me. And it's just kind of a natural thing that comes out in me to lead, to the point where sometimes I have to be like, oh, maybe I'll just, sit back on this one, let someone else take the lead. But that's something I've noticed. And then the last two have really come about more since I've become an adult, which is I've been told by many people over the past few years that I just have like a very calming, down to earth, and relatable energy that kind of like puts people at ease, which I never ever got as a kid. I was like kind of a hyper kid with a lot to say. So the first time someone told me that in my like mid 20s, I was like, really? You think of me as like calming energy? But I've really started to embrace that over the years. And then the last one is that I do think that I'm a very accepting person, optimistic person. I always seek the good in people. I always assume that everyone is doing the best that they can. And I really work hard to see all sides of something and not just one side so that I can understand where another person is coming from. So now that I'm done talking about all the things that I'm good at, we can move on to the next question, which is what lights me up? What lights that fire in you? What gives you that feeling of, ease and flow that we were talking about in last week's episode about intuition? And what are the things that you feel like you could just get lost in for hours, or, work really hard on it for weeks and weeks because it means so much to you and you care about it and it lights you up? Like, what are those things? So for me, I love creating, and I especially love creating something from scratch. So, anytime there's like a totally new project or something that is just like a concept in my mind that I need to actually bring into fruition, I will just get lost in that. And it feels so fulfilling to me, especially once that thing does come to fruition and I can look back and be like, wow, I created that. I did that. That was just in my mind. It didn't exist. And now it does because of the work that I put in. I also really love performing and like being in the spotlight, which is something that I think I tried to shy away from in the previous, years, but I was a dancer growing up. I loved dancing. I loved performing. And even though I don't, dance and perform anymore, I do enjoy the feeling of like captivating an audience. And that honestly feels weird to say because I feel like that's something that's not necessarily celebrated in society. It's kind of something that's like, oh, if you like being in the spotlight, like there's something wrong with you. But you know what? That's who I am. That's what lights me up. I get like a thrill out of, captivating an audience and having an audience in general. I also love sharing my ideas. I have a lot of ideas. I feel like I have a lot to say, and I love being able to share that with other people. I love making a positive difference in the world. I always want to be learning and growing. And obviously, I'm obsessed with like spirituality and all things nature. And lastly, the one that kind of like trumps over everything that I have been using as my guiding light for the past year when I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like a year ago, I had no idea that I would be here talking to you today about spirituality and soul missions at all. My one guiding light was that I want to make people feel seen, heard, valued, and loved. And that will never change. I truly want that to continue to be my guiding light in this world because when I'm able to do that, it gives me so much joy and fulfillment. And, it's part of the reason why I say at the end of every episode, like, keep going, you're doing amazing, and I love you. Maybe those words just go in one ear and out the other for you. But to me, that's like, those are three encouragements and sentences that like I would love for people to just feel every day, that there is someone there saying, keep going. You are doing amazing. And I love you. Like those three sentences, even though they may seem silly, are so powerful to me. And I love saying them. And I hope that they resonate with people in some way when I say them. So those are a few things that light me up. The next question that I would ask yourself is, how can I serve this world? And this is where it starts to get tricky and a little complicated, but it can also be the most fun part if you allow it to be. So you're going to find the intersection, or you're going to find how you can give back to this world, how you can serve this world at the intersection of what you are oddly good at and what you love to do, what lights you up. And this is something that will probably take some time to really reveal itself to you, because it could be a number of different things. And it's probably going to be relatively easy for you to make the first two lists, what are you oddly good at and what lights you up. And the intersection of the two is where things start to get a little bit more creative, a little less concrete, a little more abstract. So for me, I'll just kind of pull out a few things that led me to talking to you here today. If you look back at what I'm oddly good at, it's saying things in a way that stays with people. Public speaking, speaking to an audience, being some sort of teacher or coach who is able to break down concepts into smaller bits and help people learn and grow, being a leader, having calming energy, and just being willing to see all sides of things and really see the good in the people and the world. What lights me up? Creating something from scratch, being in the spotlight, having some sort of audience, sharing my ideas, making a positive difference, learning and growing, and spirituality. Oh, and making people feel seen, heard, valued, and loved. So when you put all of those together in like a big soup pot, it makes so much sense that it would produce a career path that involves having a podcast and sharing my ideas on social media, specifically around spirituality and helping people to feel calm and grounded and being like a guiding light for people through their spiritual journey. And now seeing where I'm sitting now and telling you those things that I love and that I'm good at, you're like, well, duh, that's so clear. But it wasn't clear to me. And you could probably think of like 10 to 15 other career paths or paths, however you want to refer to it as, that would fit in there. And like I tried all of those. So it's only obvious to me sitting here looking back on it now that I've done all the hard work, I've done all the experimenting, and this is where I've ended up. But I'm also very aware that this is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the book. This is, if anything, just the first couple chapters. So it's going to keep evolving and growing for the rest of my life, both in my personal and professional life. But now I have sort of these like guardrails that I feel like, okay, I can sort of navigate along this path within these guardrails, but I know that I have these guiding principles. And if I'm doing something that doesn't feel aligned with that, then I'm probably not in alignment with my soul mission. So for you, what I think is a really good exercise to do is just a brain dump. Just think, especially if you are doing this in terms of, wanting to find a career that you're passionate about, that you're good at, that you're, quote unquote, meant to do. Just write down anything that comes to mind that would be an intersection of something that you're oddly good at and something that you love to do. And I think what you actually will end up with is something that will be a lot of what you're good at and a lot of what you like to do. But if you can only connect two things, like, hey, I'm a pretty good teacher and I like sharing my ideas, maybe I'm meant to be a teacher. It's like, well, that kind of leaves out a few other things on there that, are important pieces of the puzzle. But just writing that down is helpful in terms of helping me find the direction. So write down any idea that you can think of. Don't even worry about editing it or saying, do I even want to do this? Does this sound fun? Like, just write it down and keep doing that every time you think of a new one. So, if you want to do this in your phone, in case you like think of a random one throughout the day, you can write it down. Like, just kind of give it time and space to evolve. And then you can go back in and see things like, okay, well, I probably don't want to be a teacher because, like, I have no patience for 4 year olds or something like that, and just kind of eliminate things that way. And then maybe you're left with a short list that feels like a little bit scary, but also exciting. And if you want to try those out, you can. If you just want to explore those options, like, okay, what would it look like if I was actually going to do this? What are some jobs out there that would align with this? Would I have to get a different degree with this? What does that look like? And just start to go down that path and allow your heart and your intuition and your higher self to be like, whoa, I think we're in the driver's seat right now. Our higher selves and our soul are so used to our human, beautiful ego brains. We love them, they help us out so much, but they're so used to that taking the front seat that they will just lie dormant in the background if we don't use them. And so when we start to explore these things, whether it is something that we end up doing or not, it like turns on this light switch for your soul, for your higher self that goes, I think we're driving right now. Like, I think we are in the driver's seat. And that will start to get your juices flowing more, your ideas flowing more, and you'll start to be able to hone in on the things that you are really good at, that really light you up. And there will be some sort of external factors that let you know, hey, you're on the right path. But in the beginning, don't even worry about that. Just like explore and have fun. And if you're like me, you can just try all of them and see what happens. But if you're like, Katie, ain't nobody got time for that. I hear you, I feel you, write it down, let it, permeate and give it space to evolve, and then come back to it and do some editing and just allow your soul and your higher self to take the front seat, because I guarantee you, once you open that door for them, they are going to be really excited. And just to throw it out there, your ego brain will want to stop you from exploring these things. And it is important to listen to our intuition if something doesn't feel right. Like, kind of going back to last week's episode and really honing in on what feels right within your body. However, some of it is going to just be a fear that you need to work through. And so, really being conscious of that and the distinction between those two. And we do think a lot about our soul mission in terms of our career and our profession, but over half of our life, hopefully, is spent with our family and friends. And so it's important to figure out how we can show up better for them as well, within our families, within our friendships, within our partnerships, and just kind of hone in on the type of person that we want to be, and what does that person do, and what does that person say, and how does that person show up for people in their lives. And for me, it is very important for me to be like a grounded, calming force for people in my life, a place that feels really accepting and open and forgiving, and giving grace and those types of things. So those are principles that I try to take with me, and I do not do them all the time. I'm not sitting over here acting like I'm just always giving my husband grace for like little things around the house that he neglects to get done, which is neither here nor there. But I can feel myself straying from that. And then I'm like, okay, I got to bring myself back to wanting to be that grounding, calming, patient person that wants to lead with the fact that everyone is just doing the best that they can. And if I can make them feel seen, heard, valued, and loved, then I'm doing a good job. And the last question that I would ask yourself, and I would probably do this last after sort of having a decent list that you're running off of for the last question, would be, what limiting beliefs, people, behaviors, or places are holding me back from walking in my soul mission, from walking on my soul path. So for me, some of those things were, and to a certain extent for some of these still are, fear of being seen, fear of being judged, trying to mold myself into what society wants instead of what I actually want, thinking that success is measured by the amount of money that you make, and prioritizing stability and security over everything else, and thinking that I'm not good enough or knowledgeable enough, or I have not spent enough time in this industry in order for my voice to matter or to mean anything or for me to make a difference. Those are all beliefs that I have either had to work through or I'm currently working through. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. I've mostly worked through it, but then there will be a day here or there where I'm like, have to remind myself, oh no, like I am good at this. It doesn't matter if I've been doing this a shorter amount of time than other people. I am good at this. I have evidence that I'm good at this, and I'm going to keep going. And this is definitely the least fun part, but probably the most important part, especially once you kind of have that vision of, okay, here's where I'm going. That's when it's time to do like a really big edit of your life and remove anything that is not supporting you walking on your soul path and your soul mission. And something that sort of always encourages me to keep going on my soul path and in my soul mission is the idea that there are people waiting for me to step into this, and they might not know that they're waiting, but they are waiting. And once they, see or hear or feel what it is that I'm putting out there, there will be something in their heart that feels fulfilled, that feels seen, that feels heard, that feels valued, that feels loved. And you don't have to be a social media presence or a public figure in order for that to be the case. If you want to be a therapist, there are people who are waiting for you to step into that role. And they do not know that you are going to be the most amazing therapist for them, but you are going to be. And so to kind of have an external force or idea or an identity of someone who is waiting for you to step into this role, I think can also be a really helpful guiding light and kind of take some of the pressure off of needing to do this just for yourself, because at the end of the day, we are here to serve the world. We have to serve ourselves in order to do that, but everything that I try to do is from a service mindset. And I know that when I'm in that service mindset, I will never be led astray. I will always be protected. I will always be guided because my heart is in the right place. And as long as you're doing that, you're absolutely going to end up exactly where you need to be. So, in summary, some questions that you can ask yourself in order to sort of hone in on your soul mission or your soul path is, what am I oddly good at? What lights me up? How can I give back to the world? Which would be the intersection of the first two questions. And what is stopping me from doing that? So I hope that you can play with those questions and explore and have fun and let this be a fun activity. I know that we want to just figure out why we're here so much, and it gets us to the point where we just want to pull our hair out. I know I have been there, but you're going to figure it out either way. And you can either have fun while you're doing it, or you can tear your hair out while you're doing it. So you might as well have fun, So hopefully you pick the fun route. I hope that this has been helpful for you and that it's something that can be a bit of a guiding light for you on your journey to discovering your soul mission. So that is all I have for you today. If you have enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you shared it with a friend. If you haven't already, rate, reviewed, and subscribed. That would mean so much to me as well. And until next time, and I mean these words with all of my heart, keep going. You are doing amazing, and I love you.